It's just day 2 of a high-stakes week on Capitol Hill for the Trump administration, a week that started with this revelation from FBI Director James Comey that his agency is investigating possible links between the Trump presidential campaign and the Russian government. As a reminder, here's what Director Comey said Monday.
I have been authorized by the Department of Justice to confirm that the FBI, as part of our counterintelligence mission, is investigating the Russian government's efforts to interfere in the 2016 presidential election. And that includes investigating the nature of any links between individuals associated with the Trump campaign and the Russian government, and whether there was any coordination between the campaign and Russia's efforts. I can promise you we will follow the facts wherever they lead.
Top Republican lawmakers downplayed those remarks on Tuesday. Here's House Speaker Paul Ryan.
I don't think we learned anything new yesterday with Comey's testimony. We have an investigation that's been going on in the Intelligence Committee. There's one federally. We're going to get to the bottom of things, all things Russia. But it is very clear that we have seen no evidence and been presented with no evidence that Donald Trump or his staff were involved in this with the Russians.
Lawmakers repeatedly mentioned Mr. Trump's former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, at Monday's hearing, and we're learning about new accusations against him. A Ukrainian lawmaker accused him Tuesday of hiding income he received from a pro-Russia party when he was working in Kiev as a political operative. That lawmaker says Manafort tried to mask more than $700,000 in payments. Manafort left the Trump campaign in August following revelations about his work for that pro-Kremlin party. A spokesman for Manafort called Tuesday's allegations baseless, but they draw renewed attention to possible ties between Mr. Trump's campaign and the Kremlin. Let's bring in Michael Graham and Anne Gearan, both in Washington. Michael is creative director at MediaDC, which publishes the Washington Examiner, the Weekly Standard, and Red Alert Politics. And Anne is a correspondent with the Washington Post. Welcome to you both.
Happy to be here.
So at the end of Monday's hearing, House Intelligence Chair Devin Nunes suggested a cloud was now hanging over the administration. What did that mean to you? Let me start with you, Michael.
Well, when you have an FBI investigation, it's problematic. It changes how people behave. It changes how you're viewed. Just ask Hillary Clinton, during the last year's campaign. So it's obviously a problem. And the question is, do we have questions that can be answered? The worst case is to have everybody kind of investigate for a while, and then there's nothing definitive, and then all that's left is the cloud.
Yeah, and let me ask you, Anne, what do you think about this cloud that Devin Nunes talked about hanging over the administration?
Well, I mean, I would say a version of the same about Hillary Clinton. That is exactly what happened in the campaign throughout the whole of 2016 and even before that, about her emails, about Benghazi, about the question of whether or not she faced some kind of legal jeopardy. Was always the details of it were always a little confusing to most people. I covered that campaign. They could sometimes be confusing to us. But what you were left with was the question of a cloud and whether people might be voting for a candidate who was under some kind of cloud. And now we have a president who might be under some kind of cloud, the details of which I think are very, very difficult for people to really parse out. And so I think there's going to be an enormous duty, really, on the White House and on Congress to explain exactly what this is, because the FBI and the Justice Department probably won't until they're all done with it.
Well, I want to put up this quote from Todd Purdom, writing in Politico, rather. He says the investigation raises the possibility that Trump will get bogged down in questions about the investigation, which could adversely affect his ability to achieve his policy goals. Even initiatives that have nothing to do with Russia or national security could suffer if a Republican Congress is less inclined to fight for his proposals. Michael, help us understand how an FBI probe could affect the administration's agenda.
Well, one thing is it takes away time and attention. Another thing is, like I said, it changes how people behave. If you think that you might be questioned by the FBI, you start thinking about how you're going to behave. But to me, what's so frustrating is if you support Trump's agenda, the guy who can do the most to answer a lot of these questions is President Trump, because the executive branch, he's basically, in a way, the top lawmaker, if you will. He's got the ability to see documents for themselves. If there was a FISA warrant that's part of this investigation, and if there's some question about how it was handled, the people who to get the warrant work for him. And so this is a place where a guy who cuts great deals and likes to lead could get involved and lead the investigation to move things forward. And what's also most disconcerting is I don't know if he's resisting because somebody might have something to hide or just because he's the kind of stubborn guy who resists.
Yeah, a lot of open questions right now. Well, let's talk about the president's agenda, and let's play a clip of the president Tuesday night talking about the health care bill. Take a listen.
The House bill ends the Obamacare nightmare and gives health care decisions back to the states and back to the American people. These are the conservative solutions we campaigned on, and these are the conservative solutions the American people asked us as a group to deliver. We are keeping our promises. I go to these arenas, and they have signs all over the place. He's kept his promise. He's kept his promise, because I've done a lot of work.
All right, well, when he was on Capitol Hill earlier, sources tell CBS News he told Congressman Mark Meadows, an outspoken critic of the bill, quote, "I'm going to come after you if it fails." And lawmakers reportedly laughed at this remark. But how seriously should lawmakers take this prospect of retribution from President Trump? Anne, let me get your thoughts first.
Well, I mean, I think they should take it relatively seriously. This is the first legislative test for the president, and he wants it to come out his way. If he walks away from this one seriously wounded and it's intended to do harm, that's really a big problem for him that goes beyond whether or not he fulfilled his promise to voters to repeal and replace Obamacare. That says that he's going to have a problem getting his agenda, the rest of his agenda, through a Republican-controlled Congress. It raises questions about not only his own governance, but Republican governance in general, and it'll make Republicans run scared as they approach the midterms. So there's a lot more riding on this than the mere outcome, even as momentous as that may sound, of the American Health Care Project. Really, the ability of this new White House to work its will on what should be a relatively compliant Congress, since Republicans control both houses, that's really what's on the line here.
Michael, what do you think? I mean, when I look at the note here from our producer for the readout of this meeting, it says, the president said, quote, "I asked for your support. You can blame me if you want. Mark, did you hear that? You can blame me. Mark, I'm going to come after you." Everyone laughed. And then the president said, "I hope Mark will be with us in the end." I mean, that's some arm twisting.
It is, and it's also Donald Trump's style, and it has a very different tone than other politicians have. But I agree with Anne about how momentous this bill is for the future of the Republicans in power now and their hope to hold on to power. And I think that's one of the reasons why the House version is likely to pass. At the Washington Examiner, our Susan Ferricchio reports today that the leaders really feel like they've now gotten where they need to get the votes. And then on the other side, at the Weekly Standard, Fred Barnes told me today that he thinks that if the Republican House can get the membership close within a few votes, that Trump himself will go in and do what it takes, the arm twisting or the cajoling or the helicopter rides to your favorite Trump casino, whatever it takes, and that the House is likely to pass this bill. What happens to the Senate, that's a totally different issue.
Well, let's crunch the numbers a little bit here. So our CBS News whip count has at least 24 House Republicans opposing the American Health Care Act. That's 3 more than the party can afford to lose, given the unified Democratic opposition. So if you're the Republican leadership, what are the pros and cons here of delaying the vote potentially on Thursday? Anne, what do you think about that?
Well, I mean, I think there's a fairly high percentage in it for Ryan to try to put off the vote and twist a few more arms, because a version of the same kind of stakes are on the line here for him, too. He can't be seen to have essentially thrown down a challenge to the White House. He could get the bill passed, and then, we could get the bill passed with a tweak or two, and not be able to do it.
Michael, what do you think?
I think when you're asking somebody to do something stupid and self-destructive, they have to do all in one big jump. And I think they're not going to let this linger, because this mess of a bill is not anything that any sane person wants to pass as it is. It's the first lump of putty to get in the system, to try to push things around. And I also think the Republicans have a strong argument in the phase 2 part. You know, they talk about phase 1, they can do what they can through reconciliation. The way the law was written really does give enormous amount of power to the Health and Human Services Secretary, as conservatives found to their chagrin under President Obama. And I think that there are a lot of problems that are going to appear because it's a complicated deal. Healthcare is complicated, but you've got an ally at HHS who's going to want to fix those problems in a way that moves the conservative vision of free market healthcare forward. So that's something else they can use to sell this mess.
All right, sell this mess. Not exactly a ringing endorsement there.
I think that's the nicest thing I've heard about it all week, I'll be honest with you.
All right. Tell us how you really feel, Michael. Anne Gearan and Michael Graham, thanks so much.